All right, and we have a very special guest on the show today. He is running for mayor of the city of Cleveland. Justin Bibb, welcome to the show. How you doing, sir?
Thanks for having me, man. How are you?
All right. So we pretty much kick off all of the interviews the same to let our audience know where the candidates are coming from. So we'll start from the top. Why do you want to be mayor?
Well, listen, my campaign is really centered on this notion of Cleveland not being able to wait right now, given this moment we're in our city. And I believe that now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, but now is a time for just bold, new, dynamic, visionary leadership to move Cleveland forward. I'm a son of the Southeast Side. I grew up on one of the toughest blocks in the city. And I experienced firsthand many of the issues that folks are going through day in, day out. I had to bury too many family friends due to gun violence. I remember seeing my mom struggle to make ends meet to put food on the table. But despite that pain, I think in this moment coming out of this pandemic and after the tragic murder of our brother, George Floyd, we can turn this pain into purpose and really make Cleveland what I believe to be the best mid-sized city in America. But it's going to take a new political coalition to do it. And that's what I'm trying to do in this race as a candidate for mayor.
All right. Since you just kind of alluded to it a little bit, let's talk about the issue of crime. Yeah. And obviously that's something that's on everybody's mind right now. As we've seen, crime rates go up, not only just in Cleveland, but all across the country. So what are your plans to address both the immediacy of the moment, and also dealing with the root causes of it, so we won't be back in this place every 3, 4, 5 years?
You're spot on with your question. I want to say a couple things. Number one, I believe that social justice and safety are the prerequisite to opportunity in all of our neighborhoods. It's fundamental. And in Cleveland, I believe we have to do a better job of being more thoughtful and data-driven in terms of how we really support our communities around public safety. So a couple things. Number one, you may not know this, but Cleveland actually has more police per resident than Columbus, Indianapolis, Toledo, and a few other cities across the state of Ohio. However, only 51% of our cops are walking the beat. The other 49% are in desk jobs. That makes no sense to me. And I think we got to have at least 70% of our cops walking the beat, being visible, doing the good work of community policing all across our city. Secondly, as you alluded to in your question, the way we police our cities like Cleveland across the country is broken. And I think we got to do the hard work of reimagining what policing should look like. So as mayor, I intend to add a fourth option to 911 around mental health, so you can have the right response for the right call. And then I also want to embed social workers and mental health professionals and trauma specialists with our first responders to join them on nonviolent 911 calls to make sure we are starting to do the hard work of addressing the root causes of violent crime and the trauma that we see in our cities. And I think that holistic approach could go a long way to not only address the immediate issues we see with crime, but also long-term, bringing more hope and bringing more real prosperity to many of our neighborhoods.
We're talking with Justin Bibb, who's running for mayor of the city of Cleveland. And I know my brother Dante has a question. Go ahead, Dante.
So, Mr. Bibb, one of the bigger knocks against you is that you don't have traditional experience, right? But you do have nonprofit sector experience, you have public experience, and you are from this city, you are a Clevelander. So how do you plan to use the experiences that you do have to work to your advantage to lead our city?
What I'm trying to do in this campaign, Dante, is really reset this notion of the kind of experience we need in our elected officials. I think one of the biggest problems we see in Cleveland, particularly in local government in this city, is that you have people that are in politics that have only done one job, and that's being a politician. And when you think about all the issues we have, from public safety to economic development to public education, I think having people who have done things outside of government is important so we can take a fresh look at these problems. And so, I spent 15 years of my career as an executive advising mayors. I led that business at Gallup, a global consulting company, working with mayors all across the country on how to better use data and technology to improve city operations and government services. And then, right now, my job at Urbanova as the chief strategy officer, I work with cities all across the country on how do you identify better ways to use technology to address climate change, to address resiliency, to address health in the built environment. And then, I spent nearly 3 years as a board member of the board RTA. And in that role, I really helped them out. How do you modernize the agency by putting Wi-Fi on all the buses? I helped lead an effort to put body cams on our transit police officers to get more accountability. So, I'm bringing experience outside of government, but that is relevant to the challenges that we see inside City Hall. And I think it's that kind of experience voters want to see in this election.
In a quick follow-up for you, you mentioned technology, and that's something that I think is huge. How do you plan to use that to reach our youth? Because it could be a way to create opportunities, whether through like STEM programs in schools, which we know, more opportunities for youth could be a crime prevention tool, but also to either create jobs or to make the city safer, or also just in a way to make our city easier to navigate. How do you plan to use technology to further grow the city?
Yeah, great question, Dante. I would say a couple of things. Internally at City Hall, there are basically like modernizing our website. I think the last time the city's website was updated was in 2005. It's nearly 20 years being outdated. And then, what we saw during this pandemic is that many of the services and data was still warehoused at City Hall versus being in the cloud, right? Where we could have allowed employees to work remotely and still be able to go in the neighborhoods, be in the communities during this pandemic versus City Hall being closed 2 days out of the week, right? And modernizing these legacy technology systems, I think, will allow us to truly have more high quality basic city services. And then externally, look, one of the things that I experienced during the pandemic through the work I was doing in the community was many of our Main Street businesses didn't have access to Wi-Fi. Many of them were still using fax machines. Many of them didn't have emails. And so they didn't have any clue on how to apply for COVID relief, how to apply for a PPP loan. And we don't find a way to connect our Main Street neighborhood-based businesses to the digital economy. It's only going to exacerbate the inequities that we see in our neighborhoods. And so imagine a scenario where we had kids from the neighborhood, because a lot of these kids younger than me, I'm 34, they know how to use Instagram and TikTok and Twitter better than I do, right? They know how to create websites better than many of us do in our own cohort. And so those students could really be great assets to give them to better support our Main Street businesses so they can be thriving businesses long term. So it's just doing a better job in the city of being tech oriented and connecting the dots across the board.
All right, we're talking with Justin Bibb, who's running for mayor of the city of Cleveland, and let's talk a little bit specifically about Cleveland's economy and improving Cleveland's economy and stuff like that, but particularly for African Americans. This is a city that is 49% Black. What are your plans to improve the business climate for African American businesses specifically?
Well, I think at a macro level, we got to make City Hall a better place to do the business. We are one of the worst cities in the state and probably in the country to do business with. And so having a modern and responsive City Hall will go a long way to support all of our businesses in the city. As it speaks to how to better support Black-owned businesses, look, you think about the millions of dollars we spend as a city purchasing goods and services. We need to make sure that a large share of that money is spent towards better supporting Black and Brown owned business in the city. And we got to stop making the excuse, oh, we can't find a Black owned contractor that can help us with our tree canopy, or a Black owned contractor that can't help us plow the streets when we have a snowstorm. Well, if that's the case, then the city should be the first lead investor to incubate that business, because that's how you build long-term wealth. And so that's going to be my approach, to make sure that this city could be a champion, a partner, and a lead investor in better supporting businesses of color all across the community.
And another question that we've talked about with other candidates is the issue of the Black middle class, because it's a conversation that I don't hear very often. I am very pro-development in the city, so it's not, I don't have an issue with the stuff, the positive development that's going on in the city, but I very rarely hear anybody talk about trying to attract the Black middle class back to Cleveland. So first of all, do you see that as an issue? And if you do, what would you do to address it?
Yeah, I mean, look, your question is spot on. When I think about my own origin story in Cleveland, my grandma came here from Alabama, and Mount Pleasant was a beacon of the Black middle class. On my dad's side, the same thing in Glenville. And we got to find a way to get back to that. And we lose many of our Black families to Twinsburg and Macedonia and Shaker and Beechwood and Avon. And we have to make this a city where the Black middle class can thrive. I think one of the biggest things we can do to address that is improving public education. We know that we can't have a world-class city without a thriving, equitable, excellent public education system, because that's how you compete for families. And then I would also say making sure we do a better job of improving our housing stock and the quality of our housing stock long-term, so that we can attract middle-class families, particularly Black middle-class families, back to the city of Cleveland.
Mm-hmm. I'm talking with Justin Bibb, who's running for mayor of the city of Cleveland. So if you get elected, first 100 days, what's your priorities?
Well, the first thing I'm going to do is what I've learned to do from the successful mayors I've worked with across the country is we got to do a top-down audit of every single department and identify what's working and what's not working, and really think hard and clear about how do we reimagine what City Hall should look like as we claw our way out of this pandemic. Because if you think I can go into City Hall with these bright ideas that we have and execute and be successful with the same structure of city government, then you're sadly mistaken. A lot of these departments are not structured in a transparent and logical way. And so we got to think differently about what these departments should look like and how City Hall should be operated and functioning long term. I think secondly, I believe that our lead paint crisis is public enemy number one. And we're gonna have a lot of resources, given the fact that President Biden has given cities like Cleveland over $500 million to come out of this pandemic. And I intend to allocate at least $17 to $20 million from the city's coffers to support the work to eradicate lead paint in our city. And then lastly, the digital divide. The fact that we're the least connected city in America, I'm gonna say that again, the least connected city in America is a shame. And we know that access to high-speed broadband is a basic civil right and a basic economic right in this country right now. And we as a city, we have to do a better job of having a true public-private partnership to eradicate the digital divide and not only connect families to high-speed broadband, but make sure they have the right digital readiness and training and support to access those services, whether it's healthcare or a good paying job, or making sure that a child can do remote learning. And so that's going to be my priority when I hit the ground running in my first 100 days.
Dante?
So, Mr. Bibb, you mentioned our housing issue and getting people to stay in the city to rebuild the Black middle class, but there's also a homelessness crisis as well. So my question to you is, do you have any plans to address that as well.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of advocates fighting for our homeless brothers and sisters. And, I've been hearing a couple of things. The first thing I hear is that the city needs to have a more proactive role with the county to address our homelessness issue. Everything from more permanent supportive housing, which would allow our homeless population to get in a quality home where they can live with dignity, and at the same time get the social and emotional support they need to get their life back on track. I think that's fundamental. I think secondly, we have to re-examine our benefits policy and how these benefits are structured, because in some instances, if you're homeless, you are not allowed to get a housing voucher to be in a home unless you've proven that you're chronically homeless for a year. To me, that makes no sense. If you're homeless, you should be able to get a house immediately, right? And government should have a strong social safety net to support you in that process. You have cities like Houston and San Diego that truly believe in this housing first policy, where they get you in a home first, and then work with you to get you the support you need to get back on your feet. And so those are all things I want to explore as mayor, and I think this is why the bully pulpit of the mayor's office truly matters so much, particularly on this issue.
All right, we're talking with Justin Bibb, who's running for mayor of the city of Cleveland. And obviously in Cleveland, one of the issues that we have is that we have some neighborhoods that are doing really well. We have some neighborhoods that are not doing well. So what is your plan to keep the momentum going in the hot neighborhoods while also expanding that to the rest of the city?
Well, it really is the haves and have-nots. And as I've canvassed and walked all 35 of our neighborhoods across the city, you see the disparity. And I think what's happened is as a city, we failed to learn how to walk and chew gum at the same time, unfortunately. Because what you've seen over the last 10 years is that we've essentially, put $10 billion or more in downtown Ohio City, Tremont, and other parts of the West Side. But yet, Lee Harvard, Mount Pleasant, Buckeye, Glenville are still struggling, and they haven't had any real investment in generations. And when I talk to folks on the East Side, they tell me, look, Justin, I want to see cranes in the sky, as Solange would say, in the East Side, just like we have on the West Side. And I think the solution to this is really disrupting how we think about economic development in the city. We've had a one-size-fits-all approach for far too long. And my philosophy is that we got to have a hyper-local approach of economic development. And City Hall should be structured in a way to deploy the right tools, the right incentives, and the right policies that reflect the needs and the nuances and the conditions of our neighborhoods, block by block, in a very hyper-local way. Because a 15-year tax abatement should not be the end-all be-all, right? But we should use that tool as a way to incentivize more workforce housing, a more equitable development in our East Side, and make sure we hold these developers and investors accountable to meet those standards long term.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of, I'm actually glad you brought that up, because I wanted to ask you a little bit more about that too. Like, where are you on the 15-year tax abatement? Because I'm hearing conversations that are a little concerning. It's like, there's some people that kind of feel like we've arrived already, so we don't need that anymore. And I'm like, I don't think that's where we're at yet. So, where do you stand? Where do you stand on the tax abatement?
Listen, I'm somebody who has studied economic development policy and finance. And I recognize that our recovery as a city is very fragile. Even in some of the quote unquote hot neighborhoods, that recovery there is not as strong as people would want you to believe. And so I think it's important for us to have policies like the abatement, but restructure it and retool it to ensure we are incentivizing the right kind of growth and the right kind of economic development. Because what's happening now, particularly in parts of the West Side, is that you have long-term homeowners that are getting priced out or displaced because they can't afford to pay their property taxes. And then you also have instances where, a middle-class family can't afford a $250,000 home, right? And so what I believe you need to do is restructure the abatement policy, explore caps to that policy, have more standards around using it to encourage more inclusive economic development with really clear metrics and accountability standards. But also, I want to make sure we can explore long-term homeowner property tax relief so that our seniors particularly can age in place and live a life of dignity. But we got to have a more holistic approach to this. But City Hall must still be a player to encourage this development, because we have not arrived quite yet where we don't need it anymore long term.
Right. All right. We're talking with Jesse Bibb, who's running for mayor of the city of Cleveland. We're starting to wind down here. We have a few minutes left. And our third co-host, Robin, has joined us a little late, but we'll forgive her because it's early. It's real early today. Robin, I know you have a question for Justin. Go right ahead.
Yes. Hello, Mr. Bibb. So my question is, the film and entertainment industry is important to us. Now, do you support that growing the industry in Cleveland?
Absolutely. I know that at one point we had a pretty competitive tax credit at the state level to encourage more films. And I know that locally there have been a few folks looking at acquiring some of the abandoned land and vacant lots we have to invest in a major film studio in Cleveland. And you look at all the great assets we have at CSU and Tri-C and others that are really pumping out good film and art and broadcasting talent, and that could be a big growth driver for the city in the future.
Mm-hmm. So as we start to wind down here, obviously, Clevelanders can be a very cynical bunch at times, and you are running as someone who is young and with no elected official experience. Let's put it like that.
Mm-hmm.
So what would you say to Clevelanders who are having a hard time? How do you get them to trust you as mayor?
I would say it's by the way I live my life. I learned early from my work with President Obama when he was in the U.S. Senate that when you're a public servant, it's not about the title. It's not about being anything. It's about doing something. And that's how I live my life. I did something when I was at American and started my first nonprofit, helping inner city kids get access to service learning opportunities so they can graduate from high school. I did it as an executive at some of our largest companies, not only in Cleveland, but across the world, helping mayors better use data and technology to improve basic city services. At Key Bank, helping to support investing in small and medium-sized businesses to create good quality jobs right here in Northeast Ohio. And then I've done it as a civic leader and activist on the board of RTA, fighting for more affordable public transit, and as a co-founder of High Cleveland after the murder of Tamir Rice, working with the community to look at new solutions to address criminal justice reform. And so I live my life under one premise, really focused on bringing people together. And I intend to not be a politician, but a servant leader. And I hope voters will know that and see that. And come election day, will have faith in me and trust in me to be their mayor and to be their servant leader day in and day out.
All right. And finally, for people who are listening to this, who may be young, late teens, early 20s, who may want to aspire to, accomplish some of the things that you have, what advice would you give them?
Be bold, take risks, and shoot your shot, right? A lot of folks thought I was crazy when I decided to run for mayor without ever holding elected office before at the ripe young age of 34. But I would say, imagine if Dr. King in his mid-20s was told to wait his turn and didn't organize the Birmingham bus boycott. And imagine if Rosa Parks decided that she needed more experience, so she wouldn't want to sit in the back of that bus. And so I think great leaders in this country and around the world all started under the premise that, regardless of how old or how young you are, if you have conviction, if you have the right life and lived experience, and if you have the right integrity and values, then you can lead. And I would encourage young people to shoot their shot, take risk, be bold, and just live in your truth and understand your why. And that's the best way to create change in this community.
All right. Let everybody know how to follow you on social media if they want to get more information about the campaign, all that good stuff.
Check us out at Bibb for CLE.com. That's BIBBFORCLE.com. We're also on Twitter, IG, Facebook. The election is September 14th. Early voting started 11 days ago on August 17th. So if you want to vote early, mail in your ballot or go down to the Board of Elections and cast your vote because this will be the most important election, I believe, in Cleveland's history. And your voice matters and your vote matters in this election.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us on the show and spending some time with us, man. We really appreciate it.
Thank you guys for having me.